This video is designed to remind you about the two things you're allowed to do to an equation and how to do those things to the example equation that I've written below. So the first thing is that you're allowed to simplify a side, which means that you are allowed to rewrite a side or combine like terms in a side or distribute on a side such that it's clearer and easier to understand what you have on that side. The second thing is, if you do something to one side of an equation where you actually change its value, you must do that to the other side as well. So for example, this would involve adding 5 to both sides, or subtracting 3n from both sides, or doubling both sides, or dividing each side by 7 should you wish to. Let's see how this plays out in the example equation written below. If we only consider the left side of the equation, we notice that we have two terms with n's in them, that being the 3n and the 2n, and so we should be able to combine those like terms to get 5n. We also notice that we have two terms that have simply numbers in them and not n's, one of which is -5 and the other of which is -1, if we consider them to be 3n plus -5 plus 2n plus -1. So that's -5 plus -1 is -6, which means that we have 5n minus 6, or equivalently 5n plus -6. We'll leave this as 5n minus 6 for now. That's kind of the conventional way to write it, but either would be acceptable. Looking at the right side, we can simplify that by distributing, or using the distributive property, distributing the 4 to each term within the parentheses. If you recall your distributive property, that's going to give you 4 times 2n, which is 4 times 2, or 8n. And it's going to give you 4 times 6, which is 24, but it's positive 4 times -6, if you want to think about the minus sign as attached to the 6, which you can, thinking of it as 2n plus -6. So it's therefore 8n plus -24, or 8n minus 24. The point is, after doing this process to each side of simplifying a side, we have now simplified each side as much as possible, and yet we don't know what 1n is yet. However, every time you've done this with a linear equation, you're going to be no more than 3 steps away from finishing the problem. Those 3 steps are quite simple and have the process of trying to collect all your n's on one side, collect all your numbers on the other side, and then divide by how many n's you have to get exactly what 1n is worth instead of a group of n's. So let's go through this process, and we get to use legal algebraic step number 2. Whatever we do to one side of an equation, we must do to the other. I'm going to choose to subtract 5n from each side, and the reason I'm going to do it is when I subtract 5n from the left side, 5n minus 5n is 0n, or simply 0, meaning we have no more n's left on the left-hand side, which is our goal. We've collected all our n's instead on the right. So we have 8n minus 5n is 3n. So we have 3n minus 24 equals -6. Now, the second step in our goal, so we've applied legal algebraic step number 2, subtracting 5n to both sides. In order to keep it balanced, if we subtract 5n from one side, we have to subtract it from the other side. Having done that, we've cleaned up our equation, and now we have n's only on one side. In order to get rid of undo subtracting 24, or to get rid of the 24, we can simply undo that operation, meaning add 24 to both sides. And that's going to get us 3n left on the right-hand side, because all of that is equal to 0. And on the left-hand side, -6 and a positive 24 is 18. I'm going to draw a little arrow over here to give us 3n equals 18, and it doesn't matter which way I've written this, 3n equals 18 or 18 equals 3n, it's equivalent. And now I'm going to find out what 1n is worth by dividing this side by 3, which means I need to divide the other side by 3 to keep it equal. And that gives us 1n, or just n, equaling 18 divided by 3, which of course is 6. This is an answer that you should be able to plug back into the original equation and check to see that the two sides balance when n is 6. And in fact, it is the only answer for that possible equation, only possible answer for that equation.